Do you want to start?
Testing. Sounds pretty good.
You don't have to do the video if you just want to try the sound.
Sure.
We can adjust it down here too.
Well, I'm wondering if, ooh, that is,
Yeah.
There are three main types of requirements for the MLC Direction Financial.
so we're not interrupted by that. First of all, thank you for coming. This is an important thing. Seniors, as I said to you a few weeks ago, when you graduate, whether you're 18 or not, your education records become yours. Your mom and dad can't request them anymore. Okay? That means that when it comes to college, things like that, you have to make sure that you're signing off giving them permission because, let's be honest, for most of you, your parents will be helping you pay for it. So make sure you sign yes, that they're going to get you report cards and things like that. But this information, as far as scholarships, things like that, during the year, that's going to come to you from college. Make sure you're staying on top of this information. It's good for you to understand how this works. I was talking with Joellen Crone, who's from MLC. She's going to be talking. On the way up, I said, things have changed since I was in college. Financial aid is not exactly used in the same terminology. Now they say financial aid package, which includes loans, scholarships from the college. So you have to understand that terminology. Otherwise, before you know it, nothing wrong with this, but you might be having debt coming with student loan and stuff. So we'll explain some of that terminology and how those things work. Some things I want to show to you, especially the parents, just very quickly. The seniors and I went through this, and we're going to meet again to go through this. But this is why we went to a program called Overgrad this year. This kind of gives you a quick breakdown of whatever colleges you're following. I put MLC up there. I had no name on there for some reason. But as you notice, it gives you some basic information, some costs. But as you look at it more, it gives you more information about what's the debt typically that comes out of there when somebody's at college and so on and so forth. Make sure your seniors get you signed up for this. They're supposed to be doing that. Juniors and junior parents will meet and get you signed up with that too. Another reason why we went with Overgrad is because of this. It also has a search function for scholarships where you can go in, say who you are, put in some information, what you're going for, where you're located, and then it gives you a list of all these different scholarships that you can apply for. So seniors will be going through this, so make sure you get your parents set up with this account. They need the directions for that. Another important thing is now that we have the Cardinal app up and going for parents too, some of you know this, but I will start monthly register ramblings that I send to you about information with college. It also has a list of scholarships that are on there. One of them is Meyer & Associates. You guys have a scholarship each year, so please take advantage of looking at those things. Make sure you quickly read through it. It's just bare bones, basic information. Read through it. Very important about signing up, when you can sign up for FAFSA, when it ends, some tips for things. So with that, I'd like to welcome our people who are speaking for us tonight. First of all, we have Mrs. Joellen Crone from MLC. Very thankful she can be here. Last time she was here, she was fairly newly married. Now she's a new mother with an 8-month-old, so she's away from her for really the first time. So thanks for coming. And then also Mr. Greg Dahlberg, who's from Meyer & Associates. So when you go up 81 to Bay City, there's the Lutheran Church right there. They're not too far after that. They're really right there. So I'm very thankful that they come and they're speaking to us. So with that, I'll hand it over to you guys.
How you doing tonight?
Do you want this?
You guys hear me okay? Or do you
Yeah, you can do that from the parent. We're recording it too.
Uh-oh. Not sure it'll work this. This is the mic. Going the wrong way with it. How about this way? You can see how often I use the microphone. I think that's right. Can you guys hear me okay? If not, throw something at me and I'll talk louder. I may end up holding it. Bless you. Try this again. All right, thank you. Welcome. You guys are brave coming out here on a Sunday night to learn about financial aid because it's not an exciting topic. That much I will tell you. Thanks for coming out. I'm going to go through some material tonight, some PowerPoint presentation. I may bring a little bit different twist to it than Joellen. It's good to have us both here tonight. My background, I'm a financial advisor, been with Meyer & Associates. We've been in business for a little over 31 years. I've been with the firm a little over 17 years. And in our firm, we do kind of comprehensive financial planning. helping our families figure out how to retire and select investments. And then mom and dad eventually will come to us and say, hey, we've got kids, remember, how are we going to get them through school? 16, 17 years ago, I was the one dumb enough to volunteer with Wayne, my boss, to jump into the college funding arena. And that's why I'm here tonight, and Wayne is not. So I'll share with you just my objective is you guys can leave here with a few things that you maybe did not know coming in. Personally, I've got 3 children, 2 in college. So right there with you, I've got a daughter that just finished up her undergrad, moved her to Arkansas, starting med school, and a son that's in a second year of college and a sophomore in high school. So you're not in this alone. We're kind of all in this together, okay? I'll go through the PowerPoint. If you guys have questions, feel free to ask. Maybe we'll wait till the end. And if there's something I miss, Joanne will pick up, and then maybe we'd both be available at the end to kind of field any kind of questions that you may have, okay? Paying for school, it's lots of things. We'll talk about the financial aid process a little bit tonight, when to do it, how to apply, what to include, what not to include. But from my side of the fence, financial aid's a lot of things. It's how are we going to pay for this as parents? Remember, mom and dad, there is no retirement loan. Okay, and I want to make sure that us as parents are prepared. I don't want mom and dad or the kids to borrow a penny more than they have to. But for most of us, getting the kids through school, this is going to be the single largest investment beyond our home. Financial aid will be part of that. Scholarships, we'll talk about when it comes to scholarships. I'm going to tell the kids leave no stone unturned, and they should start looking now. If you've got a freshman, sophomore, junior, not too early to start looking for scholarships. Do not pay for a scholarship search. Okay? Did everybody get a packet coming in the door? There's handouts. Andrew mentioned our foundation. Those packets that I handed out, you're going to hear lots of information about the financial aid process. You're going to hear all this terminology. You don't have to remember it all tonight, but there's definitions. A lot of that stuff is in your handout packets. There's kind of a calendar of what to do and when. Andrew mentioned our foundation. We've got our own charitable foundation. We give away about $60,000 a year, $50,000 to $60,000 a year to local high school graduates based out of Midland County. Minimum GPA 2.0 or higher. If you got a packet or a handout, you actually have our application in there. Okay. Application dates and deadlines. There are some important dates and deadlines, and if we miss them, could potentially cost us money. Okay. First date I want to make sure everyone's aware of is October 1st. Anybody know what October 1st means? It's the absolute soonest we can apply for financial aid for our students if they're a high school student or a returning college student. So parents of freshmen, sophomore, juniors, don't need to worry about it. If you have a senior, we're, 21, 22 days away from filing or being eligible to file for aid for next year. State of Michigan has a priority filing deadline. It's March 1st. But I want you and everyone that has kids going off to college to make sure that they file their financial aid applications the month of October. Okay? Taxes and tax planning. If you do your own taxes, you have an accountant, a preparer, a CPA. When you have kids in school, make sure you understand the tax benefits that you may be entitled to if you're doing them yourself. If you have a preparer, remind them when you guys get your taxes done, hey, we have kids in college, don't forget, so that they don't miss any of the education credits we'll touch on a little bit today. Admissions, I tell most students to apply to more than one college. Reason being, if they do not get accepted to the school that they wanted, that they've got a backup plan. If we decide that the school that they wanted to go off to, when we know what the actual cost will be is going to be too expensive, we have a backup plan, okay? So don't rule out a school based on cost. If you have a student that wants to look at a $50,000 or $60,000 a year school, let them look, even if you haven't saved a penny. Some of those schools, depending on how well your student's doing academically and what the household financial situation is, may not cost them much more than attending a local community college, okay? So don't rule out a school initially based on cost. Finding the right school is important. If you've got seniors, juniors, it's not too early to be doing college visits. Seniors should be doing that already. Maybe have done that this summer, if not this fall. Juniors, still not a bad idea. Lots of times kids go off to school. As parents, we don't want to get a call in the first week or two saying, hey, come get me, the school's too big, too small. And that happens frequently, okay? Forms, there's lots of them. Funding strategies and solutions. I know that that's what we run into a lot in our office. Our clients are coming to us saying, Greg, how do I pay for this? We've been able to save, but somehow 18 years go by awful quick, and we didn't save all the money that we thought we were going to need because of soccer and dance and braces and hockey and everything else that goes along with it, and mortgage payments. So trying to figure out a game plan that's going to, a way for us to pay for that education as much as we can but I don't want, again, mom, dad, or student to take on a penny more in debt than they absolutely have to, okay? If we determine the school that they're wanting to go off to is going to be cost prohibitive, then a lot of the schools will offer what's called the transfer or articulation programs, okay? Very often, and I've been doing this a long time, I will get referrals in from clients, and they'll say, gosh, can we send our neighbors in, or their kids, they're done with college, Greg, they need help paying for school, they're not sure what to do with their loans. If I'm sitting down with them and they said, gosh, yep, we've got $60,000 in loans, we're not sure how to pay it back, it's too late. They've already amassed that debt, okay? And there's no magic wand that I'm aware of that can be waved to make that go away. So sometimes there may be options that students have if we've determined a college is going to be too expensive. A lot of these colleges will have what's called transfer articulation programs when we have somewhere here in our local area. So if you do have a student that's staying here local, I'll pick on Northwood, for example. If we've got a student that wants to go get a marketing degree in business management, a bachelor's, Northwood right now runs about $43,000 or $44,000 for one academic year, okay? If the student's getting a lot of scholarship money or mom and dad have the funds, great. If not, they have a working, what's called an articulation program with Delta College, where the student can attend Delta right here in our backyard for about $4,000 a year, transfer to Northwood for one, and come away with the identical degree that the student at Northwood for 4 years had. So a lot of these schools have these agreements with other schools, know that that could be an option, could save a ton of money. Retirement planning, after all, in my opinion, that's what this is. So I always tell everybody, the school, the government will make it easy for us as parents to pay for school, but there are no retirement loans, meaning there's lots of different loan options out there, and there's ways that we can get that bill paid, but I don't want mom, dad, and student to be scratching their head in 5 or 6 years saying, okay, now how do we retire and pay this debt back? So anybody started looking at the cost of school? Anyone? This is just a snapshot to give you kind of a ballpark idea. The average private school right now in the state of Michigan is running a little over $40,000 a year. Average state school, approximately 20 grand. That's for one academic year. Okay, bless you. If you take nothing else away, in my household, I've got 3 kids. I'm not going to have kids in school for 4 years. They're going to be in school for multiple years. I've got one client that has, their kids are now done, but they had 6 kids. They had college tuition bills for 17 consecutive years. Okay? So our job is to figure out not how do I pay the bill next year and come up with 10 grand to cover it, but if I've got a child that's going to be in for 4 years and then another one coming, in my case, a third one coming, we want to have a game plan that says, how am I going to navigate that expense, still be able to fund my retirement, and pay those bills. Look at this big picture. If you have an advisor you work with, ask them for help. Your accountant, your CPA, your financial advisor, bring all these people together. It's going to be a big expense for all of us. This is a snapshot for, if we haven't looked at the cost of school. I actually stole this off Saginaw Valley's website a couple years ago. There's a reason they put that on there. This was the in-state tuition at every 4-year school in the state of Michigan. And Saginaw Valley had it on there because they're at the bottom. They had the cheapest in-state tuition, about $8,600 a year. Michigan Tech at the highest at just under 15 grand. That is tuition only, not room and board, books, housing, and the extras that go along with that. Savings, average savings. Any idea what the average college savings is throughout the country? Statistically, about 3 in 10 families have saved money for college. Any idea what the balance would be? Less than 10 grand. So if you think your friends, your neighbor, your peer group's writing checks, we got clients from coast to coast, it's not happening. I don't get many calls saying, Greg, where do I write the check out to? The bill's $25,000. It's not happening. Which leads us to number 2, which is going to be to borrow. When it comes to borrowing, again, I don't want mom and dad, and I don't want these kids to borrow a penny more than they have to. There's far too many kids coming out of college with a 30-year mortgage already before they found a job, okay? But if we're going to need to borrow, we want to borrow as much money as we can in the student's name first. Any idea why? Kids are going to get better rates, terms, and conditions than we as parents ever will. So your student may, no guarantee, may be eligible for what's called a subsidized loan. So it's a zero-interest loan to them and the entire time they're in school, as long as they're taking at least 6 credits. There's not a loan that I'm aware of out there for us as parents where they will let us borrow at 0%, okay? Scholarships we talked about. Make sure you check with your employers, your church, any service groups, your high school, local foundations. Our foundation, you guys have the handout in there. Work closely with the schools, Martin Luther College, any school that they're going off to. When the kids will be considered for those colleges' transcripts or for their scholarships when their transcripts are sent by that school, based on their SAT, GPA. But there could also be private donor scholarships that they would be eligible to receive at that school that the financial aid office may not spend any time trying to get those kids matched up with. So the students are going to have to spend some time looking for those beyond the ones that the school will automatically consider them for. The financial aid process, there's some myths out there. I don't know if anyone's ever had, anyone have kids in school already or been through this process, or is everybody in here new for the first time? One, two, a couple. You may hear somebody tell you, don't waste your time applying for financial aid. You make too much money. We have the same job. Don't apply. Don't listen to them. So if you do nothing else, promise me that every single year you have kids in college that you are submitting financial aid applications, even if your student does not receive need-based financial aid in the first year or two or three. The dynamics change year by year. And a lot of folks get discouraged. They'll apply one time. They may not receive anything. So they say, why bother the next year? Don't do that, okay? I've got clients in our firm with adjusted gross incomes in excess of $200,000 a year with their kids receiving need-based financial aid. Would they get that at a Delta college? They wouldn't. But if they have students going off to a more expensive school, and maybe they don't have one child in school, they have two or three, the calculations will change depending on the cost of attendance at the school they're going off to and how many children that family has in college. So make sure you do that every single year, okay? Owning a home doesn't matter. Aids for special groups, there is aid for certain groups, but it's not just special groups. Everyone in this room is going to be eligible for some form of financial aid, okay? Loans, as Andrew mentioned, are construed as financial aid. So don't pay anyone either to help you find financial aid. I can guarantee everyone in the room financial aid tonight for free, because there's loans available for all of us, and that's construed as financial aid, okay? So don't pay for a scholarship search or just to fill out a FAFSA process. It's an easy process, and school people can help. School people can help work closely with them, both here at the high school, the college level, folks like Joe Ellen, wherever your kids are going off to school, make sure you're communicating with the financial aid office. And I would encourage you, any other advisors that you may have, you want to make sure that we're not missing any application dates or deadlines. How do we apply for financial aid? Step one, and you guys have this in your handouts, is we're going to talk about the FAFSA, but before, what the FAFSA is, it's a free application for federal student aid. That's Uncle Sam's questionnaire to start asking us about how much money we make, how much money we have, do our kids work, if so, how much money do they have, what type of accounts is it in. It's their application where they're going to take all of our financial data and plug it in and come back and tell us how much we can afford to pay for their school before they will be considered for any need-based financial aid. Will you agree with the number that they come up with in their formulas? You're not going to, okay? Will you agree with half the number they come up with? Probably not. But when we go through and fill out this application, if we're going to submit it electronically, we can't submit it without, we have to electronically sign that. And to do that, our students need to set up what's called an FAFSA ID. And there's a website up there, and you guys have this in your handouts, so you don't have to write it down. They're going to go and enter their name, address, social security number. They'll get a code emailed to their email address. They'll bring it over and submit it. They're going to verify that's their username and password. That's going to be the signature that they'll use on these applications the entire time that they're in school, okay? Because every year we have to recomplete the process. Mom or dad has to complete one as well. So my wife's name is Carrie. Does she have to have one, and do I have to have one both? Nope, either one of us can. But one of us is going to have to sign that, attesting that that information we submitted is correct and accurate to the best of our knowledge. We're going to do that with that FAFSA ID, and our student needs to have one as well. Those are things you can do today. Even if you've got a junior, you can go on. It doesn't cost a penny. How do we apply for financial aid? The FAFSA, free application for federal student aid. That's the website, and you guys, in the packets that I handed out, you actually have a copy of last year's financial aid application, a paper copy. And I would encourage you to take a look at that. You can actually kind of mock that up before you would sit down and submit your actual application, okay? The website you'll do that to is fafsa.ed.gov. There is a website out there that's very similar to this, and I don't want to mention it because somebody's going to write it down and go there thinking it's the official website, but don't write this down, I'll tell you what it is, FAFSA.com. Every year I get phone calls from folks that say, Greg, we're ready to submit the FAFSA. We're at your workshop 6 months ago. You said it was a free application. It is. Now they're wanting us to pay them $50 to submit the application. You're at the wrong website. FAFSA.com is a website that will allow you to get all the way to the end, but they're going to submit for payment. That is not the right website. FAFSA.ed.gov. Okay? Won't cost you anything. This year you will file, so parents of seniors, October 1st, you don't have to file it October 1st, but if I've got a senior in this room tonight, I want theirs done In my office, I want them all done the month of October. So we sit down with our clients and make sure that we may submit 300 FAFSAs the month of October. Some of the aid that's out there may be awarded on a first-come, first-served basis. If they're opening up the door to start handing out aid, I want to make sure that your kids are in line first, okay? You're going to submit that based on your 2016 tax return. So, which everyone should have that done already. They just made this change here a year ago. So you're going to gather your 2016 tax return. There's actually an option, or will be, in the FAFSA where you can actually link over to the IRS and click a button to retrieve your data, and it'll pull it all over into your application for you, okay? If anything has changed significantly for you since 2016, it may have. Retirement, job loss, divorce, disability. We have to file based on the information taken off our 2016 tax return, but those are things that you'd want to contact the financial aid office and speak with someone like Joellen to say, my situation's changed. Look at what's going on here in our country right now between Texas and Florida and the hurricanes. Okay, there's a lot of folks who are going to be displaced, not working for quite some time, but they're submitting FAFSAs based on 2016. Those are things that I would want them to communicate to the college financial aid office. They may make changes based on your circumstances today, okay? If you have a student, there are some schools out there in the state of Michigan, really only got one. I would suggest if your students are going to a school and you're not certain, I would contact the financial aid office and ask them what applications do you need beyond application for admissions and the FAFSA form. Some colleges here in the state of Michigan, University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. So if a student is considering going there, they need to be considered for financial aid. They need to complete the FAFSA form, but they also need to go to another site and complete another application that's not free. It's called a CSS profile application. That one they will ask more questions, and that's not a free one to submit. Most schools in the state of Michigan do not require it. I don't think Martin Luther College requires it. But if you have a student going to a school and you're not sure, contact admissions and ask. Just make sure that we're not missing something. Talked about applying to multiple schools, visit multiple schools, have a backup plan. If your son or daughter is not accepted, or maybe they were accepted, and even if we submit and file the financial aid applications in October, you're not going to know ultimately what it's going to cost for your student to attend that school until they've received back what's called a financial aid offer or an award letter. So we're going to go submit these applications the first couple weeks of October. That data will be sent to the college's financial aid office. The financial aid officer will begin to download that information, look at their transcripts. That's where they will start considering our students for student loans, Pell Grants, academic merit-based scholarships, and a number of things. They will put together a financial aid package or financial aid offer, and they will normally mail one to the house paper copy, but more and more schools now are doing all this electronically via email to the students. So make sure that the kids are checking their email. If they're not, make sure somebody is. I had a student here a few years ago. He was attending U of M. He was there on a full ride, and I've not had many students in Michigan on a full ride, but he was everything. And it was like his third year of school. Dad called me in a panic and said, gosh, we got a letter from U of M. My son Garrett's lost all of his financial aid. I said, I have no idea what's going on. Come on in. Long story short, we contacted the financial aid office. They had needed some additional documentation that they had emailed to his son. They had like 3 requests because they wanted proof of the information that was submitted that was correct. They wanted tax returns, which is not uncommon. They may want what's called a verification worksheet, which is not uncommon. But their son had just neglected 3 emails to respond, so they literally withdrew his package, and then they processed everyone. They said, get us the information, we will repackage him. And they did, but he got most of his money back, but he lost, I think, about 1,500 hours that year just because he didn't get it back to him in a timely fashion. So make sure that the kids are checking emails. And I would talk about, too, making sure that we have discussions at home, the bottom of the slide cut off, but having a financial discussion. I have a lot of students that most of them are not concerned with the cost. They know that we parents are going to figure this out in one way, shape, or form. That's for mom and dad to figure out. Again, I would encourage everyone to sit down with the kids at the kitchen table, coffee table, and say, okay, who's paying for this? What have we set aside so far? Let's make sure that we're all having financial discussions today, not 4 or 5 years from today once school is done, okay? What goes on, or how do we submit it? The FAFSA we talked about can be submitted one of 2 ways as well. You can still do it paper form and mail it. Don't do that. You can submit them electronically. That's the only way I would submit them. If you need to make an update or a correction, or if you made a mistake once you filed it, you can go back in and make a correction. If you're doing it through the mail, it's a lot of time bouncing back and forth. So I would encourage everyone to submit them electronically. Student loans cannot be taken out for the students unless they've completed a FAFSA. So they said, gosh, we're not going to do that. I make too much money, but I'm going to have Johnny or Susie take out a student loan. They cannot take out a federal student loan in their name without submitting the FAFSA form first. What goes on the FAFSA? You guys have a copy of last year's application, and we don't have time to go line by line, but I want to touch on some of the things. I know that if I was not doing this every day for a living, I wouldn't know what most of the stuff means. I'm going to put the information on and click submit and say, there, I did it, okay? The reason I bring this up is the information that we're putting on those applications can have an impact on what your son or daughter may see or be eligible for with regard to financial aid, okay? What accounts have to go on there, which ones do not. A lot of the application is going to be basic: name, address, social security, date of birth, graduating the college they're attending, but then they're going to start asking us some financial questions. Okay, they're going to be separate from the student as they are with the parents. They may ask, they're going to ask for the net worth or balance of any savings, investments that we have or our kids have in their name. Savings bonds. I know my parents bought my kids savings bonds when they were little. Does that go on the FAFSA number one, and if so, where does it go? And how much do I put on there? Okay. The FAFSA is the one time you want to look as bad as possible on paper. This isn't like going to the bank for a loan. So again, legally and ethically, everything needs to go on there, but we want to make sure we're accounting for the right accounts and they're going in the right boxes. And the reason for that, any assets our kids have held in their name, and don't go home and make any financial changes based on what I'm explaining to you. I want you to make sure that you know what goes where and why, and the importance of this. Any accounts that our kids have in their name are assessed at 20% inside the financial aid calculations. So if my daughter Megan, if we've got $10,000 saved for her in checking or savings, I have to legally and ethically report that on the FAFSA. Anything that she has at 20%, that may affect her financial aid eligibility by 20% of that number, or by $2,000, okay? Savings bonds. So if I've got savings bonds for my daughter Megan, do I have to account for them on the FAFSA? The answer is yes, okay? Whose social security number are they on? Number one. And then what's the true value of the bond? So if you have a $100 savings bond that you or a parent, a grandparent had bought them 6 years ago, don't assume it's worth $100. If it was a double E savings bond, they would have paid $50 for it, or half whatever face value is. So you can, there's a website you can go to, treasurydirect.gov. Go get all of your bonds. There will be a number on the bond, a serial number, the face amount, the date it was issued. You can enter them. It will tell you exactly what they're worth. That $100 bond may be worth $62. So we don't want to go in and overestimate. You want to use actual values. Custodial accounts. Many people in my industry, financial advisors, are telling mom and dad, grandparents, set up these types of accounts, savings and investments for our kids for college or what have you. If it's what's called a custodial account, a UGMA or a UTMA account, then that does have to go on the FAFSA, and that is listed under the student. So if my daughter was not 18 when the account was opened, she was, let's say, 14, and I opened up some type of a savings for her. If it was opened up into one of these types of accounts, and even though my name appears on the statement, I'm just the guardian for that account, it does go on the FAFSA, and that's listed under the student. The only way it would not is if it was an education-based account. So if you have what's called a 529 plan or any kind of college savings plan, an education IRA, those do go on the application, but they are listed under us as parents. They're assessed at a much lower rate, 5.6% instead of 20, okay? Retirement accounts do not go on here. So if you've got $100,000 in your 401k plan, 403b, retirement savings plan, that does not go on this application anyplace. Remember what I said, our assets are assessed at 5.6%. If I had $100,000 and it's asking for net worth of investments, including stocks, bonds, or mutual funds, I may quickly grab that statement and know that, put that 100 grand in the box and click submit. That may have affected our financial aid eligibility by $5,600, okay? So the balance of any accounts like that that you have will not appear on this application. What does go on, and where that gets confusing, is there's going to be a question asking if we have contributed to any tax-deferred savings, including IRAs, 401ks, 403bs. That you do have to report. So if you worked last year and you put $10,000 in your 401k plan, we have to report that on the FAFSA form. Because Uncle Sam says that's money that you're directing into that account. You can also stop doing that to help pay for school. So we have to tell them how much we're contributing. You do not report the balances of. Okay? Roth IRAs are exempt, do not go on here at all. If the kids have a Roth IRA in their name, they don't go on there. Your primary residence is exempt. If you live in a $500,000 house and you have no mortgage, it doesn't matter, it's not going on this application. However, if you have other real estate, cabin, woods, condo, farmland, well, that's not your primary source of income, then you do have to account for that. And they're looking at the value. If you have a $100,000 cabin that you owe $50,000 on, then you've got $50,000 equity. That's what would go in the application. Okay, but your primary home does not. Education-based accounts, we do account for those, but they go under us as parents. Self-employed, here locally, we got lots of clients who farm. So if they file what's called Schedule F, that's their primary source of income, their farmland's exempt. I had a client that came in, 10, 12 years ago, and they had 3 daughters in school, and they never had applied for it, and they said, gosh, we have too much land and what have you, we make too much. On paper, they didn't make a whole heck of a lot of money. Their tax return was low. Their farm was exempt because they filed what's called Schedule F. So we helped them get their FAFSA filed. The kids actually came back and started getting Pell Grants. So mom and dad just didn't know that they could exempt it, but that was their primary source of income. So that asset was exempt. This we talked about. Federal Pell Grant, or the FAFSA is going to consider the kids for federal need-based aid. What is that? If income and assets are low enough, they may be eligible for what's called a federal Pell Grant. If it's labeled grant, they don't pay it back. So it's monies that the students don't have to pay back. The maximum Pell Grant this year is $5,920 that a student may receive, not have to pay any of that back. Will all students see those? They won't. It's going to be based on income and all the information that goes on the FAFSA. And there's a calculation that they will use to determine that. So if you got household income of $70,000 or $80,000 a year plus and one student in college, chances are your student's not going to see a Pell Grant. If you have a household income of $35,000 or $40,000, 2 kids in college, they're going to likely see some Pell Grant. Okay. SEOG grant, again, this money is kind of first come, first serve. So Pell Grant's not, the student loans are not, this block of money is. The federal government has money that they'll dole out to the schools for students who have extreme financial need. That's why we want these in October. Okay, so if there's money there that the school can give to the family, and that's their college work study. On your application, they will ask, is the student interested in work study on the FAFSA? I would check the box yes. On every FAFSA I file with the family, we're going to check the box yes. What that is, if the student does have a need, they will allow them to find a job on campus. Usually it's a pretty easy job or on their schedule. The income they earn from that, they have to report as taxable, but will not penalize them the next year for financial aid purposes. So what's going to make up the majority of a lot of financial aid is going to be what's called subsidized or unsubsidized direct or Stafford loans. Okay? Your students cannot borrow 100% of what they need by filing a FAFSA form. So I'll have clients come in and say, nope, Johnny's going to pay for it. They're going to go take out loans. They can borrow and take out additional loans. But for all incoming freshmen, if they're what we call a dependent student, that means we claim them on our tax return. They're not 24 years of age. They're not married. They're not on active duty in the military. They don't have dependents of their own. Then our information as parents has to go on there. Okay? If they're a dependent student, they can borrow $5,500 is the maximum they can borrow their freshman year of college through the direct loans. Okay? When they have enough credits to become a sophomore, it's going to bump up to $6,500. When they have enough credits to become an upperclassman junior and senior year, $7,500 a year. That's going to be the max. Okay? There's 2 types. There's what's called a subsidized or an unsubsidized. The subsidized loan, earlier I talked about a zero interest loan to them. It is zero interest to them while they're in school. The government pays the interest the entire time that they're in school. So there are limits as to how much they can borrow, but if they're offered a subsidized loan, I would utilize these blocks of loans before they would go borrow someplace else. Okay? If it's unsubsidized, that just means the interest starts accruing when the loan is paid out to the school. Interest rates on those loans this year is 4.45% is what the rates will be on that. Perkins loan, if they're offered, this one may go away. We'll see what Congress does, but if they are offered a Perkins loan, again, it's a good loan, 0% interest while they're in school, 5% fixed in repayment. And the last one is a PLUS loan. That's a loan that's in our name as parents. Okay? Earlier I said they will make it easy for us to pay for the kids' school. Sometimes this is how it will come in the form of what's called a Parent Plus loan. If your student's at a school, it's $20 grand a year and they're getting $10,000 in financial aid, and we're still $10,000 short, the government will let us take out what's called a Parent Plus loan. This year rates are at 7%. And if I take that out, that loan is in my name until it's paid in full. It can never be consolidated, and the students never have a responsibility to pay that back. So just make sure you're aware of that one. You don't have to make payments on it while they're in school, but the interest does start accruing when the monies are paid out. This we talked about. This we kind of touched on as well. Again, and you guys have these in your handouts, so anyone here in Saginaw County, make sure that they're going onto the Saginaw Foundation and applying for scholarships. The school, our foundation, you have a copy of the Just for Kids application. How do they determine if our son or daughter is eligible for financial aid in a subsidized loan or an unsubsidized loan or a Pell Grant? We don't just check the box and say I want a Pell Grant and a subsidized loan. It's all done, starts with the FAFSA form, okay? Every college out there is going to have what's called a cost of attendance. So Delta College, for example, theirs here is about $9,000 a year is their budgeted cost of attendance. Does it cost $9,000 to attend Delta College? It doesn't. More like $400 to $4,500, but they know that these kids are living someplace. There's no housing there, so the kids are driving back and forth. So for financial aid purposes, they will allow for more than that. Saginaw Valley is probably $18,000 if they're living at home as their cost of attendance, about $24,000 if they're, or $21,000 if they're on campus. That's the budget that the school's going to come up with that they will use to consider our son or daughter for financial aid. Then what's the EFC stands for expected family contribution. What that is when we fill out the FAFSA form, that's what that number is going to be derived from. Uncle Sam's going to come back and say, Greg, based on all the information you put on that application, here's the amount of money we feel you and your wife can come up with and your student before they're going to be considered for any need-based financial aid. And if that number happens to be lower than the cost of attendance, then there's a financial need at that school. That's what will determine if the student's going to see a subsidized versus an unsubsidized loan. Certain types of scholarships, Pell Grant eligibility is all going to be determined based on that. Put this up here because the formulas will change when we have more than one child in school. So this was an example from years ago, and you can actually figure out what your family contribution is today. You don't have to wait till your student submits their FAFSA form. A lot of these schools will have what's called a net price calculator on their website, so you can log on and start entering some of your basic household information. You can start getting an idea today. What I want to know as soon as I can is what's my family contribution going to be? We don't have to wait till the kids are seniors in high school. The sooner we know what that number is, you can start plugging that into some of these colleges to figure out what type of financial aid package our son or daughter may see at that school. This was years ago. We had 2 clients in. Their family contribution came back in around $35,000. The first thing I like to do is to figure out what is that number going to be, number one, and number two, is there anything that can be done legally and ethically to reduce it? In this case, and that's not all cases, we were able to reduce it to about $25,000. His wife had received an inheritance from a parent that passed away. It was cash. It was sitting in the bank that they weren't going to use for college. They wanted to use it for retirement. It was put into an account that didn't have to go on the FAFSA form for retirement. That's what lowered their family contribution down. They had 2 boys, so when we did this, their family contribution dropped down to $25,000, and the college that their son went off to the first year was about $20,000 per year. So the financial aid calculations, the cost of attendance, their son was at a school cost $20,000. Their family contribution came back in at $25,000. Their financial need was 0. Was there any benefit? There wasn't. So that student would not have seen any need-based financial aid that year. He had a brother, so the second year they were both in school. So what happens to our expected family contribution when there's 2 in school? It splits. So they're both at different schools, but they were about the same cost. Now instead of the student 1 getting the whole family contribution, mom and dad on the hook for $25,000, they're still on the hook for $25,000, but it's $12,500 a student. So now they've got need why both kids are in school. They had 3 years where they were both in school at the same time. There's $45,000 a need. If they would have not filed a FAFSA after year 1 because their son didn't receive anything, it would have cost them a ton of money. So make sure you do this every single year. The formulas can change year by year. If they transfer schools, if you have more than 1 child in school, the numbers are going to change. Look at if the student's uncertain where they're going to go off to school. Again, that's where I suggest having them apply to multiple schools and get multiple financial aid offers. All kids are not paying the same cost to attend college. So if we go to Saginaw Valley or Delta, do we think every student there's paying the same rate? They're not, based on a number of factors. If you've got a student that's doing very well academically, some of the schools may be inclined to compete for them as a student to maybe provide more financial aid. You want to know what your options are. The only way you're going to get multiple financial aid offers is you have to apply to multiple schools. And on the FAFSA form, you can actually list up to 10 different colleges. I normally suggest at least 5. List your first choice first, and then list some other schools that they'd be interested in to get multiple packages. If you've never seen a financial aid package, this is kind of what they'll look like. So when you submit the FAFSA, the information comes back from the college, and so it's kind of, they'll have the budget at the top, what's the cost, what's the family contribution. In this case on the left, the student needed about $14,875, and that's kind of like a sample aid package. The college came back and said, here's a university grant for $2,000, college work study for $2,000, that they have to work, they're not going to just deduct it. Subsidized direct loan for $5,500, Perkins loan for $2,000, totally $11,500, but it still left them $3,300 short. So then mom, dad, and student would have to figure out, we had an $8,000 family contribution, plus if the student still left $3,000, we need to figure out how we come up with $11,000, not just the $8,000, okay? In some cases, not all, but there may, if the school can find additional aid based on an additional scholarship or something, the package may improve. That's what the column is on the right. No guarantee, but that's why we want the kids working with the colleges early, the high school guidance counselor's office early, looking for any and all scholarships. If they can find additional scholarships that they would be eligible for, it'll drive that cost down, okay? Taxes, I'm about done. I'm probably way over my time here, Joan. So earlier I talked about tax credits. Again, you don't have to memorize all these. If you do your own taxes, you're going to want to know what these are. American Opportunity Credit, you can take that up to 4 years per child, and it's up to $2,500 per child. So if I've got 2 kids in college, and one's at Martin Luther College and one's at Saginaw Valley, and I'm paying that expense, I may be eligible for up to $5,000 in tax credits that year. So make sure that you're not, it's up to 4 years for undergrad. It's dollar for dollar on the first $2,000, 25% on the second $2,000 for $2,500 a year. If your child gets done with undergrad and goes off to grad school, then you're helping still those expenses. You can then claim what's called a lifetime learning credit, 20% of every dollar paid in tuition, you can get back in the form of a tax credit. Every year I meet with lots of families, and I'm not the accountant and CPA, we've got accountants and CPAs in our office, but I probably trip on 5, 6, 7 tax returns a year, helping families file FAFSAs where I noticed that they didn't take the tax credit. So if they missed it, you can go back and amend the return, but it's money that we just don't want to miss, okay? Student loan interest, if you're paying student loan interest, you may be able to deduct it up to $2,500 per year. Education IRAs, 529 plans, if you take distributions from those, as long as it's used for a qualified education-related expense, not taxable to you. That's why we use those accounts, years ago if you set those up. Penalty-free IRA withdrawals, I bring that up because a lot of folks will ask me, can I use my IRA to pay for college? Because most families have not amassed enough money to go pay the expense. And maybe they worked for an employer, changed jobs, so they rolled their 403B over or their 401k into an IRA. It is true that you can go tap into an IRA and take a distribution out to pay for qualified higher education, tuition-related expenses and not pay a penalty. Okay, but we still pay income tax. So, number one, we just stole from our retirement by using IRA money. The distribution will be subject to tax, which the next year is going to drive up our family contribution again, but it is an asset that can be used. Qualified state prepaid tuition plans, that's talking about like in Michigan we have the MASP plans or what's called the MET, Michigan Education Trust. Again, if you have those types of plans, when you take distributions, there's a good chance they are going to be tax-free. Again, consult with your tax preparer. What do I want to know? I've got 2 kids in college, and you're not going to remember all this stuff tonight, right? We're kind of throwing a lot at you in a short time. But what I want to know, if I have a freshman, or if I've got a high school senior, it's not too late. There's something in the financial aid system for everyone. So in my opinion, if I've got clients coming in and they got kids that are 18 years old, it's not about the stock market. Those days are gone. Right? So, I mean, if we got young kids, that's one thing, but if someone walks in my office and says, gosh, Greg, I want to go open up a 529 plan for my son that's a junior in high school, in my opinion, this is personal opinion, we're not taking on any risk. You need to know if we got $1, it can't turn to 99 cents. That time horizon is here like yesterday, okay? But there are tools out there that may even give us tax breaks. Here in the state of Michigan, the MESP, there are 529 plans that, as parents, we may get tax deductions just for putting money into them. Again, I don't want this to turn into an investment, but just giving you food for thought to talk to your advisors about or something. I had a client in last week that had $20,000 saved in cash for upcoming expenses that they're going to need in a year, sitting in a CD at 0.3% or something. We talked about and verified that these were monies that they want to use for college. I helped them open up what's called a Michigan 529 plan. It's a tax deferred savings plan without taking on any risk, putting it in a guaranteed account. The rate, I think, is paying over 1.5%. And mom and dad get a state income tax deduction of 4.25% just for putting the money in. So that'll save mom and dad $425 this year in income tax. Had nothing to do with the stock market, just taxes. There may be tax benefits. If that's $400 less I pay Uncle Sam or the state of Michigan, that's one more book I can help pay for my daughter. So what's our EFC going to be? How are we going to pay that? Making sure that, again, if I'm going to be on the hook for $5,000 or $10,000 or $6,000, whatever that number is, look at it and say, how many years am I going to have kids in school? Then what's the most tax efficient way? How can I borrow at the lowest possible cost to navigate that every year? Don't look at it 1 year at a time. If you got a $10,000 bill right now, don't worry about how do I cover that 10 grand this year, because next year it's going to come, it'll be back again. Next year we may need to borrow 11 if the cost goes up, and the year after that. So look at it in your household, family, big picture. How many kids do I have in school? What did we determine that we can help fund, and now how are we going to do that for all the years? I'm done with that. Everyone's glazed over. One last thing, and I'll turn over to Joellen. Another loan, for anyone that is here in Saginaw County, because I always forget to bring this up and I just remembered, I want families, again, not to borrow a penny more than they have to. Use the federal loans first. Okay, the whole, we could do a 2-hour discussion just on student loans. There's what's called alternative private student loans. There's lots of lenders that are out there. Use alternative private student loans last. I'm not a fan of alternative private student loans, so have the kids use the federal loans first. A lot more repayment options. There is a decent loan for folks that are in Saginaw County here, in my opinion, that is an alternative loan. And it's now Huntington Bank, used to be Citizens, then First Merit, now it's Huntington. So anyone that's here in Saginaw County, there's limits, but Carol Taylor, I think, over at Huntington Bank heads it up. They've got what's called a CKD loan, where the kids, if eligible, are eligible to borrow money at 3% fixed while they're in school. They don't have to make a payment other than the interest payment annually. When they graduate, it goes to a 5% fixed rate. So it's a pretty attractive, if once we've tapped out and used what we needed there first, just know that there's some options here locally that may make sense for you. And I didn't bring any of that, and I don't think that's in your handouts, but if you have questions on it, or any questions on anything we've talked about tonight, feel free to call my office anytime. More than happy to answer any questions I can for you. All right. With that, I'll stop rambling because I think I took up my 45 minutes and then some.
Thank you very much for your time. We'll take a quick 5-minute break, and we'll start at 7:55.
Thanks.
7:55.
Where did we go, Joellen?
Great presentation. It was a lot to take in.
It is.
What's your
Sorry. Greg?
You're great. Okay. One G or two? One G,
one.
okay.
Yeah.
There was a slide I didn't see in the packet. The local scholarships, like a quick one down Bay Foundation.
Yep.
Should it be?
Saginaw Foundation's in there.
What do you mean? Bay Foundation.
So Bay County is the
But is it in here?
Saginaw County does have a couple of scholarships that are not Saginaw County specific. So most, like Midland Foundation, Saginaw Foundation, Bay Foundation, most of them are for those that be resident of Bay Saginaw County. Saginaw does have a few where there's no Saginaw County.
Was that?
It is.
Okay. I was quick trying to, and maybe it is. Okay.
Stuff. Sorry, it's so fast to pack in. It's been about 8 hours. For the school, like dual citizenship or not? Yes. They're still making some of the yeah, but just international students that don't. Yeah, no, for when we.
No, not.
Don't drink anything. Yep. Yep. Yes. Student does. Still plenty. Yeah, I think on the handle side is our office number. Do you have any questions for people? A lot of the terminology we talked about, loans, the different, you'll see the different loan amounts, the different types, calendar events, working doing one, a lot of, like every PowerPoint slide's learning, but it's a lot of the stuff we talked about. Yeah, we know most people aren't gonna remember all this, so it's all, a lot of it's
All in that.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's all in that.
It is. Yeah, if you have questions on something that's not, then we'll have to answer questions.
Yeah, my son is in his major.
Okay.
That's why we're like.
What do you want to do at school? Any idea? Okay. Yeah. What do you want to do?
I don't know. But they're hi, you know.
Yeah, there are, we have visit Europe and
How's he doing academically? Doing well?
He's doing good. So far, that's why, but listen, you have to have like community service and all that.
Yeah, and now to get this premier and introduce resume building. So community service, part of that's academic, right? But then a lot of this
You have to have,
scholarships are
like-
locally. I know we've got our own scholarship committee. We need to look at the academics is part of it, but they want to know what has this child done beyond school. You know, so maybe they haven't done community service because they were hoping on the family farm, but they take a little longer to explain it. So then, things that we've got called what volunteer, community service, volunteer hours, and other things.
But going to church.
Absolutely. Anything and everything. I mean, it's resume building. Everything else is my time to start. If he's got a passion, something he's interested in, start a club, and he puts it in here at school, right? So if he's, they have their clubs and things, but if he's got a hobby. Yeah. Anything like that is, I used to work at a company called Road to College. And it's the guy that owns the truck museum, but he used to be Harvard's senior mission advisor in his study company. He'll do some consulting work for some of my clients. They're looking to get into competitive school. Years ago, I remember, so Steve brought that up. He said, he'll do a phone interview with a student and for academic. He'll say, passionate about these people who are going to find some the students and water pictures so they'll take to the schools. Do you still have a photographer? He said, no. He said, start with. So he did. And it was just, very maybe 4 or 5 other people. And then it was harder. Now you know what's going on in the back of the art scholarship that doesn't know. They have nothing to do with scholarship. They were, that was something that stuck out to them. They were thinking about scholarships. So maybe initially they started, the recommendation was to the only reason that they saw the initiative. So the city is making rules.
so the process they need some like interview or something like that to parents and students.
That service does.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't families, if I've got students who are wanting help, that's not my expertise. You're welcome.
Just get up and leave, but I would encourage you to stay an extra 10 minutes. Seniors, okay, you're probably starting to see, and eyes are probably starting to glaze over. There's a lot of information involved here, but you do need to do this because, as he said, they are going to send the emails to you. When you sign up and apply to a college, they're going to send the emails to you. So you got to make sure you understand this and you're forwarding it to your parents. So make sure, take this information, give it to your mom, if your dad, if they're not here, I'll get it electronically and send it to them. Also, as I said, we're recording it so they can watch it too if they want to. I'll have their contact information so you can contact them. I'm glad Joella can be here. She does do the financial, she helps with financial aid at MLC, but I think something that's very nice that MLC has started is she also sits down with every one of the students and sets up a plan with them before they leave of how are you going to pay off your debt, things like that. I think that says a lot about a college and how they are invested in their students. I'm not saying let this be your determining factor about college, but I think how they treat you when it comes to financial aid, when they have questions and so on, says something. I know, I'm not going to say a college name, but I know some colleges that are very large, that all they do is they pretty much point at the wall and say, do those steps. And that's about it. Other colleges have someone that you can call on the phone, and I would say that says something. They really care. So maybe think about that as you're considering what college you're going to attend. If you have someone you can talk to, because as Greg said, and I wrote this in someone's letter last year, over 5 years at a typical college, you're looking at $100,000. That's a home in Saginaw. That's a huge expense. So making sure you can take advantage of all these benefits, make sure you can do that. So, Joella.
Thank you. So just to reiterate, so my actual job function at Martin Luther College is I am the financial literacy coordinator. So this is a program that we started. This is our third year, second full-blown year. Our first year was kind of our little baby steps to get going. And so I do meet with students. As freshmen, I meet with students, and then we kind of go through, like, what are your plans as far as, like, if this is how much you have in loans, what will that look like when you graduate? And then before a student graduates, then we do go through a personalized budget based on estimated income and expenses to kind of get them used to real life living. Because if you are coming from Michigan Lutheran Seminary and then you're going to MLC, you will be living in the dorms for 8 years. And so you might not know what some of that cost is living on your own at some other institutions where you'd be living off campus. If at any time you have questions, please just let me know. Greg did a great job of explaining how you pay for this. The federal government's philosophy is mirrored in most institutions. It is the family's responsibility. The family and the students primarily are responsible for paying for the education. So although there is assistance, it does become really important that you do plan, because it is not going to be someone else paying for you. You may have, you follow the news, there's a lot of different states trying free college. Well, just keep in mind that even if it is free, someone's paying for it. So it's either, whether that's in taxes or other places, it's never free. So Greg did a great job of kind of explaining what goes into that, and I'm gonna just kind of reiterate a few things that are really important. So, our deadline is April 17th for MLC. So you can do it. Does anyone remember? I have a pen to throw out. Does anyone remember the date you can start your FAFSA? The first? Yes. Very good. October 1st is when you can complete the FAFSA for the first time, but you do not necessarily need to do that for MLC until April 17th. That is our deadline. So keep in mind, it mirrors tax day, so it happens to be the 17th because I think of when taxes fall, of what day of the week. So we also have an additional application. So we have the FAFSA, which is, how much does it cost to do the FAFSA? Nothing. It is free. Thank you. And the MLC financial aid application. The financial aid application through MLC is a pretty basic form. It pretty much has your contact information, but it's also going to be where if you have younger siblings that are in parochial school or high school that you're paying tuition, that gets reported on there so that we can take that into account on the FAFSA. That will reduce essentially what that estimated family contribution is. We can take into account tuition for younger siblings. All right, we already covered this, October 1st. We also talked about this. That FSA ID, one thing I want to mention about this is your signature, this is your electronic signature, and it will stay your electronic signature for any federal-related financial aid things. So that every year you need to sign off on the FAFSA. A parent and the student both have to sign the FAFSA using this. But it's also what you use to complete the master promissory note and the entrance counseling for your student loans. It's also what you need when you graduate and you do exit counseling for your student loans. So it's very important that this, when you set this up, students, you know what that information is, because you need to remember that username and password. So parents, you're doing a disservice if you're doing it for them and writing it down. It needs to be something that they can remember, because they're going to be accessing that for multiple websites in the future. All right, so this again is just to reiterate that the information that you're using on the FAFSA is actually prior tax year, so it's 2016 information. The whole reason they went to this is because your taxes should legitimately be filed, and so it's going to be very easy for you to get that information and put the real numbers in. Now, for some of you, that may be very skewed, because maybe that year you had, you were working a lot of overtime, or you had a different job, so you do need to work with the individual schools if that's not accurate to what's happening right now. Keep in mind that anything else having to do with your current, it asks you your checking, savings, investments, that's current. It's only the tax information that's 2016. Everything else is going to be a current information. Just some reminders about the FAFSA. We've had this situation, you'd think people know their name, but sometimes they may not realize that their legal name is not what they've been called their entire 18 years of life, and so they put in the name that they think there is their name, and it's not their legal name. That becomes a very big issue when you're filling in this form, so make sure it matches exactly what is on your Social Security card. Also, if you have no information, put a 0. Don't just leave it blank. We covered the rest of those two. On the bottom one, I do want to point out, if we do have any families that are divorced or separated, make sure you include the parent that provides more than 50% of the income. And a step-parent must be included if that parent is married, whether or not that step-parent is contributing or not. So Greg also mentioned this, verification. Oftentimes, the government will flag certain files to produce additional documentation, and it's kind of a pain in the butt, but it's something that we are required to do. So if your student's file FAFSA gets selected for verification, there are additional forms that we will be needing. Also, MLC selects families with certain expected family contributions, and so a lot of times we are selecting those, because there's oftentimes, specifically with called workers, things that get misreported, and so we need to make sure that that's reported correctly. So we will be sending notification of additional documents if they are needed, and that was a great reminder to check your email, because that is how we will notify you if we need additional forms. Okay, special circumstances I mentioned. If your 2016 income does not match what is accurately happening now, because it was inflated in 2016, you need to let us know. Same with if you had extremely high medical bills for something. There is in the FAFSA, there is there's an amount that they're already kind of putting into the formula, so it would be above $5,000. If it's above $5,000, then you will want to let us know, but we will need documentation of that. Okay, so once you do the application, MLC will also give you their financial aid award, and we use a system that is called Net Partner. So it is a website that you would go to, you'll set up your username and account. And again, students, this is something that if you are planning on going to MLC, you will use it all 4 years, so it would be best if you set this up so you know what that password is so you can access it all the time. Once you're in the system, then you can see if there's any documents that are needed, or if there are, or once your financial aid award is complete, that is where you will see it. We do not mail out paper copies any longer. All right, so this is a listing based on your GPA. You automatically will be eligible for certain scholarships. So what is the GPA requirement to get a messenger scholarship in high school? What is the GPA requirement? If you are here as a senior, what do you need to get for your GPA to get the messenger scholarship? That would be to renew it. So go over to the left to get it for the first time, messenger scholar. Yep, there you go, 375, here you go. So to get a messenger scholarship, 3.75, but that was a good reminder that once you are at MLC, then you only need a 3.5. So witness scholarship, you need a 3.5. How much can you get in the witness scholarship? Who said it? 1,500, there you go. So these are the two big merit-based scholarships that we give the most in. If you are a National Merit Scholarship recipient, National Merit finalist, sorry, you would get the 4,000. You would also likely, if you have at least a 3.75, you would also get the messenger, so you can get both when it comes to that. Then the other thing too is, let's say you don't have a 3.75, but you do get that ACT. Notice there is an ACT minimum as well. So it's one or the other, GPA or ACT. So ministry scholarships, that's for returning students. That is $1,000. Those are scholarships that the professors actually nominate students. So that is a good reminder for you to get to know your professors if you come to MLC, so that if you do not qualify for the witness or the messenger, you may end up getting the ministry scholarship. Any questions about the scholarships and how they work? So there's a higher GPA requirement to get it initially in high school, and then it is a little bit lower to renew at MLC. And you have 2 semesters. So let's say your first semester you have a 3.1. You would not renew the scholarship, but then if you had a 3.25 in the spring, then you would renew it for the next year. And also, if you had a 3.25 fall, you would get the witness scholarship, but let's say in the spring semester it went up. If you start in as a freshman with a witness scholarship, you can move up to the messenger scholarship, so you can kind of float between those. On the website down there, we also have a section for additional scholarships. I should have put a screenshot up there for you, but I didn't. We have really generous donors who contribute and set up different scholarships for, maybe it might be a freshman who's going to be pre-seminary and is from Wisconsin. There might be a scholarship for that. Sometimes it isn't so specific. Maybe it's like right now, there are scholarships out there for incoming first-year students who have at least a 3.5, I believe it is. And then they have to do an application with a short essay, and then that particular scholarship actually renews each year. So that's a great one, and that is something that is every year. So freshmen coming into MLC, keep an eye out for that one, which is always due around the middle of September. So in addition to the merit-based aid, the need-based aid is calculated based on the FAFSA. So there's no real, we have a specific formula, and so it's going to be based on whatever that information is. And so you can kind of see the range of the grants. Anywhere from 200 to 7,600 are the amounts of that additional need-based aid. Distance grant, if you qualify for need-based aid, you automatically would get that if you live at least 750 miles away, which I'm assuming most of you probably do. And then there are, like I just mentioned, endowed scholarships. That would be on the website that you would want to take a look at. Congregational scholarships. Last year, we had the CPGP, the Congregational Partner Grant Program. And so there was matching funds for congregations that would apply for their student, then there were matching funds from MLC. I'm hoping that that gets renewed. I don't know for sure, so we'll have to keep an eye out for that. But if that's something that your congregation's willing to give you a scholarship and they do the application in time, and then there's free matching money, you absolutely want to take advantage of that. It's not actually aid, but summer earnings, I can't tell you enough how important it is for you to get in the mindset that every summer you're going to work, because the best way to pay for school is with actual money. You will find that it gets you far. So that is something that will, there's always great opportunities for different service programs. You can go do travel, canvas, witness, things like that. That's great. However, you also want to be mindful of the fact that it is going to be very helpful for you to be able to, at the end of the summer, put a chunk of change right onto your tuition account, regardless of where you're going to school. When it comes to loans, the general rule is you don't want to borrow more than your first year's gross earnings. So does anyone have any idea what the first year teachers might make? Any guesses? First year teachers, what they might make for a salary, base salary? $45,000. Thank you for guessing. Way too high. 10, well, okay, that's really low. That's pretty close. That's pretty close. That's very, very close there. $29,072. That is base salary. That does not include housing allowance. But I think it's really important to have a premise. What does that look like? Because although we don't go into ministry for big bucks in our pockets, but we do have to be realistic about what that means. So we don't want to borrow more than that if possible. Greg mentioned this as well, there are limits on how much you can borrow. So there are yearly limits and there are aggregate or cumulative limits. So you'll notice in bold, you cannot get more than $31,000 in a federal direct student loan, okay? So when you hear that students are getting more than that, and maybe you've heard it like, I heard that this student has like $80,000 in loan. Well, they're either, part of that could be graduate school loan debt, or they could potentially be borrowing private loans in addition to the federal loans. So this would be just the federal loans. Now, the difference between the two columns were the two different loan types that Greg mentioned, subsidized and unsubsidized. Can anyone remember what the difference is? What is a subsidized loan? It has something to do with interest. Correct, you do not have to pay the interest. You want another pen? You do not have to pay the interest while you are in school. The government pays that for you. So that is why it's subsidized. They are subsidizing it for you. Now that middle column is based on eligibility, which is coming from the FAFSA. So if you do not qualify for a subsidized loan, you wouldn't be in that middle column at all. You'd be in that far right, and you would only have unsubsidized loan. That's the difference between the two columns. Now you'll notice that at a certain point, it just becomes senior year and beyond is $7,500 if we're looking at the total max. Now, is anyone very highly considering going to MLC? I should ask that. A couple hands. Okay. Any of you thinking of double majoring? No. Okay, well that's good. You'll get done in 4 years. Congratulations. If you were thinking of doing a double major, that usually takes 5 years to complete. The issue that has with your loans is that that 5th year, you don't have that full $7,500 eligibility. Can someone do the math for me? If you borrow $5,500 your freshman year, $6,500 your sophomore year, $7,500 your junior and senior year, what do you have left? $4,000. Would you like a pen? Okay. So you would only have 4,000 eligibility, so that's really important for your planning purposes if you are going to be a double major. So keep that in mind. Now, just because you were offered the maximum does not mean you need to borrow it. So maybe you don't need the full $5,500 your freshman year. Maybe you only need $3,000. That would be absolutely fine. That would give you more eligibility that 5th year. So keep that in mind as well. This is something that people really like to kind of see, well, what is it going to feel like? I will tell you, honestly, I just paid my student loans off last year. So, hooray, just in time for my daughter Hazel to be born. I didn't know. When I was in college, I was like, sweet, sign me up for a loan. I won't think about it, and then I'll pay it when I'm done. And so that's what I did. So don't do that. It's a little painful if that's your approach. It's helpful to kind of know what that's going to feel like. Now, it is kind of hard when you don't really understand what your salary is going to be, what your living costs are going to be, but I will tell you that if you are at $31,000, this is doable on a teacher or pastor's salary. It is doable. The people I'm worried about are not the ones with $31,000, although no one likes to take out debt. It's if you have to borrow that and an additional loan that it becomes really challenging. But if you are in this situation like that, loans are a reality. If you are around that $31,000, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not worried about it, depending on what your other circumstances are as well. Don't go out buying a huge car loan, that would impact that as well. But this is very doable. Now, this is also based on standard 10-year repayment. They do have, as Greg said, flexible repayment options. Those of you who are interested in MLC, any pre-sem guys? Anyone looking at seminary? Awesome. So for you, it gets a little tricky because these loans do become due when you are in seminary, because seminary is not accredited, so it's not considered as being in school. But the government has really flexible repayment options, and sometimes it's called an income-based repayment. Sometimes the amount due actually might be $0. Now, obviously, that's not going to cover the interest that's accruing, but it's going to give you some flexibility, and that's something that I will work with students on, and we kind of go through what does that mean, what is that going to look like. So this is just this will get them paid off the quickest out of all of the plans with the least amount of interest, but there are other options for when life comes at you fast. Isn't that a Nationwide commercial or something? All right, so here is this is going to help hopefully put it all in context. So this is what the current costs are for MLC. So you'll notice at the top is the tuition, room, and board. That's how much we actually bill the student for, $20,470. The bottom number, that cost of attendance, includes costs that you may or may not incur. So maybe if you're going to be flying home for Christmas, or you need your books or the things for your dorm room. That's all the extra stuff that you may or may not need to spend that much. Most of the time, that number is much higher than what you would need to anticipate, but you can kind of do a little bit of a tally and figure out what that would be. So this is where what the amount billed would look like. So this is an example of a current a current bill, there are 4 different payment plans. So in this particular example, you can see in the top right, $20,590. That does include a parking fee as well. And this particular student received a messenger scholarship and a congregational grant. So they did not actually utilize their federal loans. Had they used their loans, so the 4 payments, you can kind of see them. The first one was made on August 7th for $4,000. So it ends up being the first 2 are about $4,200 and the second 2 are about $4,600 because of that parking. Now, if they would have taken out the federal student loan, then their payments would have been around $3,000. 4 payments of $3,000. That sounds like a ton of money, and it is, but then if you can figure out, okay, well, what if I can contribute $3,000? I'm gonna save during school, during the summer, then now you've gotten it down to $9,000. Now you break $9,000 into 4 payments, and now you're at $2,272. That's a lot more doable, especially if you think like, okay, and I can work part-time while I'm in school. A lot of times, students may or may not be thinking about working. I will tell you that most of the time, there's been a ton of research on this. Students who work a part-time job in addition to school are more time efficient. It's proven. I don't know why, but it is. That being said, there are a lot of flexible jobs on campus. There are, opportunities, so if they don't have a car, you don't want to have to worry about bringing one to campus. There's opportunities to be working and still helping to contribute to the cost of college. There's also jobs in the community. New Ulm businesses love to hire MLC students. And I have heard from students who are working at AMPI, the butter factory, that they get, it's a factory job, but they get paid very well. And there's opportunities sometimes for working odd shifts, and so then they actually get paid higher during those times. So there is a lot of opportunities, but this may look scary and sound scary, but I'm telling you, if you, with a little bit of thought and ingenuity and hard work, it is very, very possible to do this very feasibly. Now, there is also an option of doing a 10 monthly payment plan. So this is an example of this. This particular student only had loans, so they didn't have merit-based aid. So this scenario with merit-based aid and a little, I'm not even including any grants, which most families qualify for some form of need-based aid. In most families get some kind of grant. It just depends on where you're at with your expected family contribution. So this is $1,500 per month, but that is something that maybe between the student working a little and the parents helping a little, that's a lot more doable at that amount. But again, it does require work and planning. So that's kind of an example of what that looks like. This option does require a bank account to be on file, and they withdraw that on the 10th of every month. So that's the one caveat with that. You do have to have a bank account on file. So this, when it all boils down, you want to make sure that you apply for financial aid by the deadline. The deadline again for MLC? April 17th. Thank you. If you want a pen, come see me. And then applying for scholarships, saving any money that you can to put towards this, and only borrow loans if you have to. That's a reality for most people, but it is something that oftentimes can make things a lot more doable. So I mentioned that we have a financial literacy program, and I kind of want to give you a little bit more insight as to what does that mean, what does that mean for the students, what are the requirements for that, so you get a better idea of what kind of information students will be learning about. If I can make this work.
There are 3 main types of requirements for the MLC Direction Financial Literacy Program. Each year, students will have 3 to 4 online activities to complete through Cash Course. Individual meetings are required for students new to MLC, focusing on loan details and responsible borrowing, and required for graduating students, reviewing the transition to life after college and creating a personalized budget. Group sessions are currently only required for first-year students and juniors. Students log into Portal and select Financial Literacy under the Grades tab. They can track all of their requirements here. The online activities through Cash Course can be completed anytime during the academic year and take about 20 minutes to complete. Group sessions will only be listed for first-year students and juniors. Students will be emailed to set up their financial review meeting if one is required. Once any of the requirements are done, the status will change to complete. We have special events in April to celebrate Financial Literacy Month. Students have opportunities to win prizes for participating. Any student can contact the Financial Literacy Coordinator to set up an appointment, even if one is not required. Additional resources are available on the MLC Direction website. We also have a Facebook page that lists helpful articles and scholarship opportunities, both on campus at MLC specifically and through other organizations in the community.
That's our theme on campus this year. Don't let the wrong moves sink your budget. So we have different events that we kind of have for students. There's group sessions, like I said, just opportunities to make sure that finance is something that isn't it's not a dirty word, and budgeting isn't, it's something that everyone should really take some time to do for your future. So with that, that kind of breezed through things, but if you have questions, let me know. You can always contact myself or Mark Bauer, the Director of Financial Aid, or Val Beauvais. Any of us at MLC would be happy to work with you. If you really want to know what it's going to look like for you specifically, we can get some information and do kind of an estimated financial aid award so that you have a little bit more time to kind of prepare, because otherwise you wouldn't get your formal information until April. Any questions? Okay, thanks. Well, I'll stick around. If you do have any, you can come just chat with me.
Okay, any questions for either Joellen or for Greg to follow up on some things? Okay, this is a lot of information. Thank you very much for coming. Just a few things. First of all, I want to thank them for coming and spend some time away from their families. So thank you very much. Take your husband out and your daughter out to dinner. Take your family out also. So thank you very much for coming. They do this every year on a Sunday, so I'm very thankful. A few things. Someone might say, well, what if my son, what if my daughter isn't planning on going to MLC? What good is this for me? Ask these questions when you go to a college. This is a lot of the information you have to ask. Make sure when you're looking at these stats, you had some information about different types of scholarships. Every college has them, CMU, Delta. Make sure you ask very specific questions. Are they front-loading it to get you there, and then on the back end you don't get as much aid? Okay, ask questions like that. This was very good, what was here. Other colleges have it too, so understand the questions that you need to ask. I think their financial literacy program is huge. Whether you like this football team or not, Trace will like it, Alabama, they put on a huge addition to their football program a few years ago, and they actually have rooms off to the side of the stadium where they meet with the students, the players, and they walk them through resume and job interviews. I think that says a lot about their program, that they care about their students afterwards. I think this is huge, that MLC very much like that too, is caring about the students afterwards with your budget, things like that. So thank you very much.